One thing, or the only thing that we're going to use mood and figure for, is to determine whether an argument is unconditionally valid or conditionally valid, or lastly, invalid from both perspectives. So what you would do is take the mood and figure that you get from whatever argument you've translated and put correctly into standard form, and you will use the unconditionally valid forms and conditionally valid forms charts, which are in chapter 5 of your textbook. In the 11th edition, it's page 262. They're also in the back of your textbook, and there is, in addition to that, a handout on Moodle. So let's say that your mood and figure is, like one of the examples before, EIO4. You would go to the unconditionally valid forms chart first. Right? So you have to determine first whether it's unconditionally valid, then whether it's conditionally valid. And that should make sense to you, because if it's unconditionally valid, then it doesn't need a condition, so you don't have to go to the second chart. Or it's not on either chart, in which case it's invalid from both perspectives. So let's say that you go to the unconditionally valid forms chart, which by the way is associated with logician George Boole, whereas the conditionally valid forms chart is associated with Aristotle. Why? Because a more modern logician like Boole does not care whether or not the things that we're talking about in the argument, like soldiers or patriots or whatever, actually exist in reality. Aristotle does care. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to Venn diagrams, etc. But let's just say that anything that doesn't exist, like a unicorn, leprechaun, gnome, things of this nature, or even things like current King of England, those things are going to matter to Aristotle. So if you've got EIO4 and you look on the unconditionally valid forms chart first, you'll actually see that it's listed, that particular mood is listed under figures 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you look at it under 4, it will be there. Therefore, this is unconditionally valid. Let's say, for example, however, though, you got EAO, just for comparison, figure 4. And you looked it up on the unconditionally valid forms chart. You looked up EAO under figure 4, and it's not there. You move on to the conditionally valid forms chart. It is there. EAO4 or EAO is under figure 4, but you've got a required condition to the right-hand side. S exists, M exists, or P exists. S exists means does the minor term exist? M exists means does the middle term exist? And P exists means does the major term exist? So if you saw EAO4, you would want to look back at what the actual middle term was to determine whether it was something that exists in reality or not. If it does not exist in reality, like a gnome or a fairy or what have you, at least in the world of logic, then it will be invalid from both perspectives. If that condition is met, that the middle term stands for something that doesn't exist, like firefighters or soldiers or patriots or whatever it is that we've had in other examples, then it will be conditionally valid. So if it doesn't meet the condition, it could be invalid from both perspectives. And if you don't find it on either chart, then it could also be invalid from both perspectives. And that's how you would determine validity.